Hey everybody, welcome back to another reaction video. Hope you're doing well. My name is Todd. This is the power of regeneration of Doctor Who. This was requested by a Patreon subscriber. You too can join the Patreon. Link down below in the description will get you there. Throw a like on the video if you like it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Hit that notification bell. That way you know when videos post immediately. And you can come check them out. And let's go.
And before this video begins, I would just like to tell you that I have a PO box until early December. So if you want to send me any like fan mail or
I also
like
have a PO
jokey
box
things
in
for
the
me to open
description.
in Patreon videos, or if I get enough in an actual video on the main channel, just send it to this address. And yeah, just thought I'd let you know. Anyway, on with the video. So if you've been following me on Twitter for the past year or so, you may have seen that I've been showing my girlfriend Doctor Who for the very first time. And she gets intensely attached to characters incredibly fast, which means her heart was shattered into tiny little pieces when the 9th and 10th Doctors regenerated because she loved them so very much. Seeing those iconic scenes through the eyes of a complete newcomer really got me thinking, what makes a good Doctor Who regeneration? Should it be long and drawn out to really twist the knife, or should it be quicker and more simple to let the moment speak for itself? Well, hopefully by the end of this video, I'll be able to point exactly what makes a Doctor Who regeneration work, and if it's even possible to have the perfect scene. Naturally, there are spoilers for literally every regeneration story, obviously, so be warned. And, you know, you'll probably need to grab some tissues because you might cry. So, without further ado,
I'm not crying on this
dive into
camera,
the world of
ever.
Doctor Who regenerations.
Would it hurt?
Promise.
Yes.
Good.
Firstly, let's understand the importance and significance of regeneration in
Watch
general.
me cry.
Back when Doctor Who first began in
That would be
1963,
funny.
it was a dramatically different show to what it ended up becoming. It was more of an educational show, and the Doctor's nature as an alien was simple background dressing. However, lead actor William Hartnell was 55 when he started the show, and he was suffering from undiagnosed arteriosclerosis, which affected his ability to learn lines, effectively making it impossible for production to run efficiently. But the show was too popular to cancel, so the decision was made to recast the actor and explain it as the Doctor being an alien able to change his face. Thus, Doctor Who's lasting legacy would be assured because the show would never be tied just to the lead actor. Anytime a Doctor wanted to move on, they could simply leave the show and the role would be handed over to another new actor with a
Very similar to James Bond. Just keeps going and they don't even have to look alike, really.
different take on the character. Regeneration is the single key to Doctor Who's longevity because it always keeps things fresh, and it provides an easy and convenient way to refresh the entire cast every few years. It's a truly unique gimmick for the show, but it does provide its own challenges, because how do you handle this changeover? How should the production team craft the ideal regeneration scene or regeneration episode? Well, let's try and break that all down. To put it simply, regeneration is the end of an era. It's a significant goodbye to the central character of Doctor Who, a final farewell before this incarnation is gone forever. Well, not forever, but you know what I mean. It's inevitable then that the regeneration scene needs to feel a bit unfair, because you don't want this character to go yet. There are a number of regenerations that exist purely to break your heart. Obviously, the biggest example is The End of Time, where the 10th Doctor desperately tries to cling on to life and visit all his companions, only to then confront his regeneration with the heart-shatteringly simple line,
I don't want to go.
There's truth to it, because David Tennant was a childhood fan. This was his dream role, and now it's all over, so it understandably makes you both want to cry. There's an innate tragic feeling to the concept of regeneration, especially when the show does twist the knife in, such as the War Games, where the second Doctor is put on trial by the Time Lords for his time meddling. His companions' minds are wiped, and he is forced to regenerate against his will. It's absolutely horrifying, and one of the saddest regenerations of them all. It provides the sense of his life being ripped away before its time, the hero being fatally punished for doing the right thing. The Doctor is a beloved character in their own right, but fans form connections with specific incarnations, therefore saying goodbye will always be difficult, and leaning into this emotion is often a very important way to emphasise how final this whole concept really is. This brings me to the question, should regeneration be the end or the beginning? I mean this both in a literal and figurative way. Even though the norm is for regenerations to be the big, climactic endings to a Doctor Who story, there have been moments where it has begun a series or a story, treating the changeover as less of a farewell and more of a way to introduce the new Doctor. There are benefits to both approaches, since an ending regeneration gives the outgoing Doctor a final swan song, whilst an opening regeneration provides the incoming Doctor with a full story to immediately make an impression without the audience having to wait an extended period of time to finally see the new incarnation in action. But the dilemma also extends to the tone of the regeneration. The 10th Doctor's regeneration is a prime example of it being an ending, because the incarnation considers it to be death, and the episode itself serves as the end of the entire Russell T Davies era, so it was designed to be seen as final and almost like the end of the entire show. Whilst it satisfies the modern audience's need for dramatic closure, it does create a very negative perception of regeneration.
Even if I change, it feels like dying.
That's important for the story the episode is telling, but it should never become the norm. Regeneration will always have an intense level of sadness, but you need to maintain a sense of positivity and optimism. It might not seem like it sometimes, but regeneration is a good thing. It's a fresh start, a new beginning, like the War Doctor finally getting to regenerate after ending the Time War and being able to return to his natural path as the Doctor.
But for now, for this moment, I am the Doctor again.
Regeneration is the last impression for an incarnation, so the matter in which they leave often has a lot of bearing on their legacy and how they're remembered. Wallowing in misery just doesn't fit some incarnations, so it's often helpful for an outgoing Doctor to look at the change in a very positive light. Just take Parting of the Ways for example. The 9th Doctor has overcome all his Time War trauma and he's saved Rose from the power of the Time Vortex. Even though he's now dying, he doesn't feel sorry for himself. Instead, he comforts Rose, who is scared and confused. He makes sure to try and make the transition easier for her because she doesn't know what's going on. He also earnestly reflects on how amazing they both were, a simple and low-key speech celebrating his own life and looking forward to the future. Similarly, the 11th Doctor also has a very optimistic perspective on his impending death. He gives a fantastic speech about how everyone changes over the course of their lives and how moving forward is an important part of life. You have to embrace change as long as you understand and respect where you came from. It's a fresh and philosophical speech because it really allows you to understand the value of regeneration and how it keeps the show eternally youthful. It's fitting for the optimistic yet reflective 11th Doctor, and it
turning a leaf instead of closing a book is a good way to put it.
Emphasizes the need for reinvention. It's the perfect example of a regeneration serving as a new beginning rather than an ending, because 11 sets the stage for his successor and helps the audience to accept him.
But times change, and so must I.
However, the regeneration scene itself isn't always the most important aspect. You also have to consider the wider story it's part of. The modern show has tended to lean towards regenerations taking place at the climax of a big, epic adventure, up in the ante in a series finale or a feature-length special. This approach often makes things feel fittingly climactic, such as the 11th Doctor facing off against pretty much every monster ever in a gigantic battle. But Classic Who always showed that the Doctor can be heroic without waging a war to end his life. One of the best examples of this is the Caves of Androzani.
Is this death?
The beloved story is, by and large, a regular serial of Doctor Who, with the 5th Doctor and Peri caught in the middle of an industrial mining dispute. Ultimately, both protagonists end up poisoned, and the Doctor decides to sacrifice his own life to give Peri the single vial of cure. He's not giving his life to wipe out an army of Zorg bats to save the galaxy of Dingleberry Prime. He simply prioritizes his companion's life over his own. He refuses to be selfish, and that makes it a heroic regeneration, despite how much more low-key it is than many others. There's a certain power in these stripped-back regenerations that don't have grand speeches or dramatic bells and whistles. The 4th Doctor stops the Master destroying the universe, only to fall off a telescope and die in a very undramatic way, while the 3rd Doctor dies from radiation peacefully after trying to reassure Sarah Jane. There's strength in the simplicity of these regenerations, letting the moment speak for itself and capping off a perfectly normal adventure. I do think it's possible for a regeneration story to perfectly straddle the extremes of being an epic last stand and a low-key sacrifice. The End of Time is a huge and ambitious narrative bringing the Time Lords back to the universe, but the focus always remains on the character of the 10th Doctor, which culminates in him not dying in battle or a blaze of glory like he expected. Instead, he has to swallow his pride and confront how far he has strayed from being the Doctor, repenting for his actions as the Time Lord Victorious and giving his life to save Wilfred Mott. One simple individual man who doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It deconstructs the 10th Doctor, and the subversion is perfect, because in a single sequence it reminds you that the Doctor doesn't need to sacrifice themselves for the entire universe. As long as there's a cause, that's what's important. It doesn't matter how big the cause is. So the scale of the regeneration story is far less significant than how it's written on a character level. That is why I love Twice Upon a Time so much. I know it's controversial, but it's such an amazing regeneration story because it's a character examination of the 12th Doctor. He goes on a journey of self-discovery and learns the importance of letting go, being confronted by ghosts from his past and realizing the universe still needs him. There literally isn't a villain to defeat this time. It's all about the character work instead, as he finally embraces change once again, rather than wanting to die permanently after a life of pain and sorrow.
Well, I suppose one more lifetime won't kill anyone.
A big wish a lot of Doctor Who fans have is for a surprise regeneration. Due to the public filming of Doctor Who and the inevitability of Thari's leak videos, the change in lead actor is almost always revealed ahead of time, because it simply cannot be kept secret for long enough. The closest thing to a surprise regeneration is the original, the 10th Planet, all the way back in 1966. Sure, the press had already been advertising the change in lead actor, but I guarantee it still came as a shock to a lot of people, who were suddenly confronted with the Doctor wandering off into the TARDIS after a normal adventure, and somehow changing his face. It's a very surprising scene which injects a lot of mystery back into the main character, because it's something you have no idea he was even capable of doing, so he becomes an enigmatic stranger once again. However, as the years went on, it essentially became impossible to pull the same kind of trick off in the modern era. There was of course the Stolen Earth, which climaxed in the truly shocking development of the 10th Doctor being shot by a Dalek and beginning to regenerate. It's one of the biggest surprises in the entire show, because it comes out of nowhere and ends with such an unpredictable and memorable cliffhanger hidden perfectly by the production team. It was the pinnacle of Doctor Who as event television, but I'm glad it was only a fake out designed to shock people and build hype for part 2. Delivering on it wouldn't really feel satisfying, because it would feel more like a narrative tool than the farewell of a beloved incarnation. The change would be too sudden, and
it would be pretty cool if they pulled that off and somehow made it work, where it wasn't just a narrative thing. It just randomly, and no one had any idea it was coming, just eighth episode of a season kind of thing, like just random, completely random. You know, the actor wanted to do something else or whatever, so it just abruptly ended it instead of filming this big climactic thing.
Permanent.
I think that'd be kind of interesting.
So you wouldn't be able to get that time to say goodbye. A middle of a story regeneration would detract from both incarnations, not allowing either one enough time to leave a lasting impression. And of course, I'm not saying you have to heavily telegraph the regeneration to let people know they need to be ready. I'm just saying it would be a bit cheap and insulting to the actor.
Or let him go a full season and then cut him off, regenerate halfway through the next season. That would be,
to make
that
such
would
a
be one way to
symbolic and important ritual nothing more than a plot device. So, what makes the perfect regeneration? Well, I hate to take a cop-out answer, but there's no such thing as a real perfect regeneration. There's so many different things to balance, because it all depends on the incarnation who is bowing out. A character like the 9th Doctor is a very stripped back and simple man. He doesn't dress fancy, he has blunt mannerisms. He's not exactly full of himself, so why would he make a big melodramatic speech before his regeneration? Meanwhile, the 12th Doctor is a very theatrical and poetic character, so it makes sense that he would give an exuberant and optimistic speech for his successor in the hopes that they won't make the same mistakes he sometimes did. It all depends on the personality of the character, and you have to make sure you tailor the regeneration to how the incarnation's death would feel most natural. One constant, however, is making sure the musical score is perfect. Regeneration scenes can be made or broken by the soundtrack accompanying them, like the slow dramatic build of It's the End, filled with mysterious and unsettling synths crescendoing in the iconic and reassuring ooey itself. It makes the Fourth Doctor's final scene so memorable, and it's hard to imagine what it would be like without such an exceptional track. Similarly, Valet de Shem is a beautiful piece of music, punctuating the more emotional and dramatic regeneration of the 10th Doctor. Just like the writing, the music needs to suit the incarnation and the moment, because it makes it definitive and memorable. And oh yeah, there is something I've forgotten to talk about because it's actually so obvious. You need to communicate to the audience what is actually going on. Whether that be through clear visuals or dialogue, the viewer needs to understand what is happening to the Doctor. That's why 9's regeneration is so good and pretty much the pinnacle of all of them, because he takes the time to walk you through the change that is about to take place. So you're not just sitting there completely lost and confused as to why he then shoots out beams of light and the guy from that one Harry Potter.
I'm assuming they did that because the show kind of came back in a way where they were capturing maybe a new generation of audience, so they wanted to really explain what the hell was going on.
The movie suddenly appears in this place talking about Barcelona. Lastly, we can't forget the importance of a great final line. Like I've previously stated, not every regeneration scene needs a big emotional or inspiring speech, but every regeneration needs a brilliant last line, because each incarnation inevitably has...
I can't remember what I'm thinking of, but I've seen this before where you think this big line's coming, they motion someone to get close to them, like get real close so they can hear them right before, they pass away. And then they get close and then they go, and then just pass away and there's no line. And they're just like, damn it.
To speak for the final time before they bow out.
Carrot juice, carrot juice, carrot juice.
The Second Doctor's desperate cries of no really drive home the horror of what's happening to him. The Fourth Doctor's enigmatic claim of his death being prepared for is infinitely memorable due to his acceptance of his death and the mystery about it all. The last line spoken by each Doctor is incredibly important, ranging from cheeky nods and references to emotional farewells designed to tug at your heartstrings. It's your final memory of them. So this last line has become more and more important in the modern era. No matter what the regeneration story is, and no matter how epic and moving the final speech is, it all comes down to a single line to bring it all home. It's one of the most underrated, yet most important parts of any regeneration. A final snapshot to sum up the incarnation as a character and capture their essence in one last moment. My personal favourite has to be the 12th Doctor's. Such an elegant and simple line containing so many emotions. It's an acceptance of death and moving on, whilst also being a very personal line for superfan Peter Capaldi, quite literally letting go of the character he grew up watching and dreamed of becoming. I think it's the best example to prove the significance of the final line, and I'll just let it speak for itself.
Doctor, I let you go.
There's almost nothing more heartbreaking on TV than a Doctor Who regeneration. The companions come and go, but there has still only been a handful of changeovers between incarnations of the Doctor. Each and every one is heavily symbolic, passing the torch of the show to keep it going. They end entire eras and allow you to say goodbye to a character that you have spent years growing to love. It's always bittersweet because it smashes your heart into tiny little pieces, but that just means another Doctor is coming in to start the cycle all over again with a fresh new beginning. Every aspect of a regeneration and regeneration story needs to be carefully considered and placed together like an intricate puzzle, because it's so important to get it right and create the perfect transition between eras. I genuinely think in a vacuum it's an art form, one of those moments where every aspect of media production has to work together in tandem to succeed. And while there may not be a trick to making the perfect regeneration, I would probably say they're already all perfect in their own special ways. Well, except for Time and Lorani. And a special thank you to my
You're gonna have to educate me on that one down in the comments. What made that one weird? Link down below in the description for the original video. Go throw it some love. I will say it is a genius move to have a regeneration and just sub someone else in, because you can just keep it going forever, right? I know whenever I watch a Doctor Who video, I always somehow relate it to James Bond. It's just because it's the longest running thing that I've seen that I can even compare it to. It's kind of interesting how they went with it, where it's just totally different actor, same character, and we just kind of roll with it. There's no regeneration. It's just the same character, just looks completely different. I'm not exactly sure why that works, but I think it's because we love the characters so much that we're willing to suspend some disbelief. There are very few stories on television or movies that can get away with that, because a lot of movies, if you switch out the actor or whatever playing the main part, people are going to be like, ugh, I don't like this. It's not the original. It's awful. There's something off about it. Like if they came out with a Harry Potter movie and Harry Potter wasn't Daniel Radcliffe and it was just somebody completely different, there would be a large portion of people like, it just doesn't have the same magic. It doesn't, well, I swear I didn't mean to say that, but it doesn't have the same magic. It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't have the same atmosphere. It just doesn't feel as good. I don't like it. It's different. It's weird. Bring back Daniel Radcliffe, you know. I mean, between Hollywood and the film industry, we have to come to grips with the fact that in 20, 30 years, they might remake Harry Potter as a kid and go through all those movies again. Everything that's beloved, everything that's, you know, sacred will be overturned. It is just a fact. I don't know why they keep doing this nonsense. The original movies are still good. I still watch Nosferatu, which came out in the 20s, and it's still fascinating. I went through like an old movie period where I was watching movies of like His Girl Friday, which came out in like 1940. I think it was 1940. You know, I went through like a Cary Grant, Audrey Hepburn, Doris Day, Marilyn Monroe, etc., Gene Kelly, all these like old 40s, 50s, 60s movies. I don't know why I went through that period. I think I was partially just thinking these are known as classics or, you know, of that period. I should watch some of these to, you know, kind of get a feel for it and appreciation for these older films. I gotta say, I loved them in 2020. I think I watched them 2021, 2020. So even all those years later, they're still good. Like, we don't have to do remakes or whatever, reboots of classic films. So I'm just trying to prepare myself for the fact that they're going to redo the Harry Potter franchise in 20, 30 years, maybe less. Oh God, could you imagine if they tried to do the Lord of the Rings trilogy again? I would like to say I did not cry from that video, but I also don't have the connection of it that a lot of you have that watch this. Regeneration is a very cool concept. I enjoy it. I think it's really smart. It's a great way to keep the show going. It's obviously a national treasure. Like, it is quintessential British television. When I personally think of British television, I think of Doctor Who. I think of Mr. Bean. I think of Skins. I think of Top Gear. Oh, it was a show called Copper, I think, and also Peaky Blinders. Obviously, Copper was made by BBC America, which doesn't receive like licensing fees or whatever because it's filmed outside of the UK, but I still think of the UK. Let me know your thoughts on Regeneration down below in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate it. Link down below in the description for the Patreon. I'll see you next one. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.